Hello and welcome to China Focus. I'm Shelley Zhang. While many Christians and non-Christians around the world are celebrating Christmas today, on China Focus we're going to take a look at what it's like to be Christian in China. Now, according to an official government survey, more than 20 million Chinese belong to the Three Self Patriotic Church. Now, that's a state-run church where the highest authority is a Communist Party member. Tens of millions of Chinese also belong to unofficial house churches. These are not run by the government, so they're able to worship as they wish, but they also face potential danger. Here today to talk about what it's like for Christians in China is Bob Fu, joining us via Skype. Bob is the founder and president of the China Aid Association. That's a Christian human rights organization based in Texas. Bob, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Shelley, for having me.
Let's talk a little bit about what it's like for Christians in China. Now, around this time of year, we see a lot of news stories from the state-run China Central Television that show a lot of Christians worshiping at churches or celebrating Mass during Christmas. Is that an accurate portrayal of what it's like for Christians?
Well, Shirley, as you said just a moment ago, that the Chinese government, of course, want to portray a different picture than the reality has in China. And during this Christmas time, the state runs a propaganda machine, will portray the Christians live peacefully and worship freely. And they try every way to hide the fact that there are hundreds of thousands of Chinese house church Christians who are not able to have the true freedom of worship, and some even are not allowed to worship in their own homes. So even in the capital city of Beijing, there is a very large house church called the Shouwang Church, who had been worshiping outdoors for the past 1.5 years without being allowed to worship in their own rental buildings or their own purchased buildings. So every Sunday, there are 20 to over 100 of members of that church being arrested and detained. And so that kind of picture had not certainly been described or displayed in the Chinese Communist Party propaganda machine.
So what is the issue with house churches in China? Why are they being not allowed to worship?
I think the true issue between the Chinese house churches and the Chinese government is the issue of the definition of religious freedom. And for the Communist Party, of course, their definition is, well, you can have some type of freedom of belief in your heart, and as long as you submit your faith under the total control of the Communist Party and its government agencies. For the house churches, as the Bible says, the head of the church is Jesus Christ and Him alone. And no other political parties or even the state cannot be the supreme head of the church. So that is for the house church, they want to worship freely that without any government interference for their faith matters. And so that means the government cannot control the way that they worship and how they worship. And even they cannot control the freedom of manifestation of their belief, as especially in this Christmas season. Many church members want to share this good news of Jesus Christ to as many people as possible. But the government certainly would not want them to do that. They want them to have their limited religious service only in the government-controlled buildings and their permitted locations.
So would you say Christmas is a sensitive time for Christians who worship at these house churches?
Oh, absolutely. Usually during these Christmas and Easter, this kind of Christian holidays season, we have seen rapid and increasing reports of persecution, harassment, and arrest.
Let me ask you on the topic of Chinese state control and religion. Just earlier this month, your organization, China Aid, released these secret internal Communist Party documents, ones that were basically encouraging universities in China not to allow Christian evangelism. What's the significance of that?
I think the significance of this Communist Party document, secret document, which was issued on May the 15th of last year, is that for the first time we now see that the Communist Party very top leadership, I mean, you're talking about the Central Committee of the Chinese Communist Party, had been directing a nationwide campaign in the name of counter the foreign infiltration or religious infiltration effort by cracking down the evangelistic effort in the Chinese universities. And this is certainly a major evidence showing the Communist Party's double talk about the Chinese citizens' religious freedom. On the one hand, they have been propagating in the international arena and telling the world that Chinese citizens have religious freedom. On the other hand, they issue this kind of the behind-the-scenes, dirty secret documents and clamping down the citizens, including the university students, professors, religious freedom in these areas.
So I want to kind of pivot a little bit now, Bob, and talk about the fact that China Aid, you've really been raising not just the plight of Christians in general in China, but also the situation of certain prominent Christians. For example, Chen Guangchen, the blind legal activist who came to the U.S. this year after escaping house arrest. Were you involved in his escape from house arrest?
We have been involving the defending and helping his freedom since really early 2005, when he was got into trouble for defending the victims of the forced abortion. And on the international arena, we have been advocating for his freedom all over the world, and of course inside China, privately. We have been encouraging the citizens to help his freedom.
So what do you think is the significance of Chen's case?
I think the significance of Chen's case is that Chen is a self-taught legal activist and a blind man, I think, who chose to really put his own life and his family's lives at risk by defending those vulnerable women and children. I think that really captured the hearts and minds of the international people. And I think he not only, doing that, but also really in person sacrificed already. I mean, he was imprisoned and he was beaten, tortured, and his wife and two children, and even his brothers and his mother, and were all facing so much harassment and beatings just for simply exercising ordinary citizens' rights that is guaranteed by actually Chinese own constitution and the Chinese own laws. I think for Chen, to defy the Communist Party's order to shut up reveals that a number of Chinese are not willing to bow to the pressure and the dictatorship of this regime by silencing their own voices. So they chose to speak up for the ordinary people, like Chen, I think, have done. And he was able to escape from this enormous house arrest mechanism. You're talking about over 60-some people, 24 hours a day, civilians, and with the most advanced equipment. And as a blind man, he was able to escape and even finally get to the freedom now in the United States. I think that sent a significant signal to the freedom fighters in China that if you are fighting for the justice, and God will not forsake you.
Well, I think it's definitely true that Chen's case may have given a lot of hope to people in China. But one of the other ones I wanted to talk about was you have talked about Gao Zhishen before as well, who's a rights lawyer in China and a Christian and is currently, still in prison. Do you think there's any hope for his case?
Well, you're right, Shirley. I mean, while we're talking about trans freedom, we should not forget our fellow brother Gao Zhishen and many other freedom fighters like Liu Xianbing, and many others who are still serving long-term imprisonment for their freedom fighting. And Gao Zhishen, I think, is another example of the courageous, the courage and conscience to defend for those vulnerable, persecuted faithfuls, and like the Falun Gong practitioners, like Christians, like Tibetans. I think even petitioners. Those are the forgotten group by the Chinese mainstream, of course, their own media. But he's also, as you shared, he had been suffering so much, not only himself, but his wife and two children. And I still remember in 2009, in January, when I got the phone call and knowing that his wife and two children escaped to Thailand. And the next day, I just bought a ticket and just flew to Bangkok and to be with them and rescue them and help them in any way that I can. And I listen, their stories. It really remind me, those people, like a German pastor called Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who risked his own lives and during the Nazi Germany time, and even organized a controversial assassination attempt to kill Hitler. And that's bold, and even to the doctrine of Christian faith. And I think Gao Zhishen himself suffered exactly, I think, for the righteous sake, for the justice. And I certainly more hopeful that, with more and more freedom fighters are coming up from the Chinese society, and Gao Zhishen's final freedom could be closer. And we certainly will pray and continue to remember him and fight for his freedom, as this man is still sitting in the dark, cold prison cell in the Shaya prison in the remote desert in Xinjiang. So we'll continue to fight for him.
Okay, thank you very much, Bob. We're out of time for today, so thank you for joining us and talking about Christians in China. For more on this and other topics in China, join us at ntd.tv. Thanks for watching.